morning. Thank you so much. Welcome back. All right, thank you so much. Have our witness return to the stand. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Thank you. Continuing with examination.
And Dr. Elkon, you do understand you're still under oath, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when we left off yesterday, I was asking you about the jail medical records that you used as part of a basis for your opinion. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
And we had already talked a little bit about the intake form that the jail nurse completed from the night of February 16th. I wanted to ask you briefly about the intake form from the jail nurse on the night of, or I guess it was the early morning of March 8th.
Yes.
Do you remember noting in the intake form whether or not Ms. Mericle was asked if she had attempted suicide?
I do not.
You don't remember if it asked her that?
Correct.
If I showed you a copy of the intake form, would that potentially help refresh your recollection?
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So it's highlighted for you.
Yes. Thank you.
So does the jail intake form include a question, have you ever tried to commit suicide?
Yes.
And did she deny that she had ever tried to commit suicide?
She did to the jail nurse.
To the jail nurse, correct, in the intake form.
That's correct.
But to you, she said that she had a thought of committing suicide or wanting to commit suicide, correct?
That's correct.
But she didn't detail for you any actions or steps that she actually took to commit suicide.
She didn't.
Okay.
And I would add, it's not uncommon for individuals who are meeting, and particularly in that setting, to deny ever having thoughts of suicide, especially if they have interfaced with mental health in the past, because usually saying something like that will get you into a medical housing that you may not have wanted to go into.
Well, how about to you, the person who's performing a psychological evaluation for her murder trial? Is there a reason why she wouldn't have told you about her attempts to commit suicide?
Sure. I think that what she was telling me was past history. If you'll note, in the behavioral observations section of my report, one of the things that I routinely ask is about current thoughts of suicide, which she denied at the time of the evaluation.
But when she told you, when she was talking to you about the late night, early morning of March 7th to March 8th, did she ever mention to you that she had attempted suicide during that incident with Mr. Barron?
Yes.
And so I thought you said that she did not describe attempting suicide.
Yes, that she said that she had thoughts of suicide. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
No, you're fine. It might have been a confusing question. So if you could explain exactly what you remember telling you about her thoughts of suicide, specifically as it relates to the incident with Mr. Barron where he was killed.
Sure. So after the incident where at the time she wasn't sure if he was dead, but it was right after the incident, she said to me in describing her recollection of that night, she said, "I was so distraught I thought about taking my own life."
Okay. Did you ask her any follow-up questions like, well, tell me what you mean by that? You know, did you have a plan? That's a common question, right, for a psychologist if someone brings up suicide, to ask them if they've actually taken steps to follow through with that plan, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ask her any of those questions?
Well, she said that she had the gun in her hand and she thought about taking her own life.
So did you ask her any follow-up questions? Did you put the gun to your head or to your body?
I did not.
Did you ask her if, did you try and pull the trigger?
No.
And then again, her telling you that she had thoughts of committing suicide after murdering her boyfriend was not something you felt important to put in your report?
I didn't put it in my report.
Because I guess that wasn't important to you as part of your evaluation?
I honestly think I thought about it last night. It was probably just a mistake.
Okay. So I know that you reviewed the other records and summaries in the jail medical records, and you would agree with me that Ms. Mericle repeatedly talks about her depression and anxiety as it relates to being incarcerated, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember reading a note, for example, that the client expressed feelings of isolation exacerbated by the confines of the correctional facility and struggles with low self-esteem? She's also reported difficulty sleeping and experiencing frequent negative thoughts, especially regarding future. The client mentioned feeling trapped and unable to escape her current environment, which contributed to her depressive symptoms. Do you remember notes about similar to that one?
Yes.
Do you remember notes similar to expressing challenges with emotional regulation, particularly in response to the stress and frustration of her current incarceration? She reported frequent feelings of anger, sadness, which she feels are often triggered by her interactions with other inmates and staff, as well as her limited control over her environment, and that she described several incidents over the past week in which she became overwhelmed and had difficulty managing her emotions, resulting in heated arguments and sense of losing control.
Yes.
And you would agree that all of those symptoms are essentially symptoms that you observed as part of your evaluation for PTSD, correct?
My evaluation, I would say more broadly, my evaluation for mental health conditions in general.
And part of what you used to help with your diagnosis of PTSD were those feelings of extreme depression, the emotional regulation, the nightmares, difficulty sleeping, things like that. Those were all things that you helped in your determination of a diagnosis of PTSD, correct?
Well, what I think you're trying to get me to say is that couldn't it just be that everything that she's reporting has to do with her adjustment to jail? I think that's what you're trying to ask me. Isn't it possible that the symptoms she's reporting have to do with struggling to adjust to an incarcerated setting? And to that I would respond, well, sure. And in fact, I acknowledge that. So on page 19 of my report, you'll see a diagnosis of adjustment disorder. That accounts for those symptoms that I observed from the jail records. Additionally, I would note on page 14 of my report, one of the things Ms. Mericle told me is that on advice of her counsel, she wasn't allowed or was advised not to talk about anything that happened prior to her coming to jail. So the only things that she was reporting to the jail counselor had to do with her immediate circumstances.
And you never met Ms. Mericle prior to her being arrested for these murder charges, correct?
That's correct.
And you never got any prior mental health records from Ms. Mericle, correct?
That's correct.
And you never spoke with any of the 6 of her therapists that she told you about, correct?
That's correct. And I would add here also, the one that would have been relevant, this evaluation, above all else, was really to account for the time of her relationship with Mr. Barron. In that time, she was kind of seeing a therapist who I tried to reach out to, couldn't get a hold of her, but she really wasn't attending therapy regularly while she was with Mr. Barron.
Right, and what about all of the other therapists that she was seeing prior to Mr. Barron?
That's correct. No, I did not get those records.
And isn't it possible that there might have been trauma or symptoms of PTSD from Ms. Mericle's past that maybe she talked with those other therapists that you never attempted to reach out to?
That's correct.
And what your test is for, as far as malingering, is malingering as to the symptoms she's exhibiting that are consistent with PTSD, correct?
Malingering for mental health conditions in general.
Right, so like faking symptoms or faking mental health, signs of a mental health issue, correct?
That's correct.
And then once you have determined that this person is exhibiting these symptoms or signs of a mental health issue, that's when you go and you talk with that individual about what could be the cause of those symptoms, correct?
That's correct.
And so when you spoke with Ms. Mericle and you asked her, what was that main trauma that, you would attribute to being the main factor in these symptoms, and she attributed that to Mr. Barron pointing the gun to her mouth on the late night, early morning of March 7-8, right?
That's correct.
So essentially, all of that aspect of your evaluation is self-report, correct?
That's correct.
And you have to assume that Ms. Mericle is telling the truth, that that event even occurred, to assume that that event is the basis for all of these PTSD symptoms that you exhibited, correct?
Yes.
And when we're talking about PTSD, the word post is in it, right? So like prior trauma that you've experienced that is now creating these current symptoms, correct?
That's correct.
And so the main symptom or the main event that the defendant describes as being the cause of all of these traumas is actually the night of the murder, correct?
That's correct.
So not post-trauma, but the current trauma that she's in jail for is what she says is the main cause of the symptoms that she's currently exhibiting to you, correct?
I'm not exactly sure of your argument because I evaluated her in September. The incident happened in March. That's 6 months post this incident. So at the time I saw her, she was exhibiting post-traumatic symptoms.
And so what I'm talking about is, there's been suggestion that Ms. Mericle's actions could have been on the night of March 7, early morning, March 8, could have been attributed to the PTSD that she had acquired from Mr. Barron, correct?
Yes.
But that event was currently happening in that moment, because we're talking about her experiencing PTSD symptoms on the night of the murder. I understand that you met her after the murder. I'm talking about what she was exhibiting the day of the murder as far as PTSD. According to Ms. Mericle, she had not even experienced that most triggering trauma yet. She was actively experiencing it, correct?
So as I testified yesterday, this was not the first traumatic event she had experienced in the course of her relationship with Mr. Barron. This was a chronic situation with chronic intimate partner violence. What I'm talking about is that that was the index trauma, so the most traumatic thing. I've also testified yesterday that she was experiencing nightmares, sleep problems, and generally heightened anxiety starting as early as October of 2024.
And that's all self-report, correct?
That's correct.
So you're assuming that she's telling the truth about what she was experiencing in October of 2024, correct?
Correct.
And because you don't have any mental health records prior to her relationship with Mr. Barron, you have no way to compare whether or not these symptoms are new and attributed to Mr. Barron, or whether she could have been experiencing certain symptoms from anything that happened in the first 61 years of her life, correct?
That's correct.
You say in your report that the defendant is consistent in her assertions of abuse by Mr. Barron, correct?
Yes.
But you would agree that nowhere in the case file, other than the night of, or the early morning of March 8th, is there ever any mention of past trauma between the defendant and Mr. Barron, correct?
Well, why would she tell?
And that's not what I asked. What I asked was, you would agree that there's no mention of past abuse between the defendant and Mr. Barron anywhere in the case file that you saw, correct?
She never disclosed it prior to that night.
Okay. So you would also agree that as far as sexual abuse, that's not disclosed by the defendant at all until she sits down with you in your interview, correct?
That's correct.
And there's no mention of really any violence at all between the two of them prior to the night of the murder to anyone other than you, correct?
That's not correct because of the text messages that we discussed yesterday.
And so I thought what you had testified to yesterday was that in those text messages, there's no evidence of any physical abuse between the defendant and the victim.
That's not correct. I testified to the fact that Ms. Mericle comments on the fact that her head, about the injury to her head in early February, and she says something to Mr. Barron to the effect of, "You should be ashamed of yourself."
And then I stand corrected because there's also the actual physical abuse to Mr. Barron that the defendant admits to in text, correct?
Yes, it was a scratch.
And if there was a photo, let me ask you this, if there was a photograph of the defendant with a scratch on her face, would you be talking about it in such a diminished capacity as you are with Mr. Barron?
I don't know. I wouldn't. I would have to know the broader context. I do know the broader context of this.
Because of your assumptions of what the defendant is telling you to be the truth, correct?
And because I've seen a picture of Mr. Barron's face.
Sure, so let's say that that picture was a picture of the defendant's face with a scratch on it. Would your response to that be, oh, well, that was just a scratch though?
I don't know the context.
Okay. So, at the end of your report, you note it's well documented that Mr. Barron locked himself in a bedroom with both his phone and Ms. Mericle's phone, correct?
Correct.
Besides the defendant's own statements, where else is that documented? How else is that well documented?
It's in the police report.
Of the defendant's statements, correct?
Correct. It's in the police report. It's in the interview transcript.
Of the defendant's statements, correct?
Correct.
So when you say it's well documented based off of the defendant's own statements, correct?
I believe so, but I also believe in the police report there's a statement to the effect of the phone was recovered.
Was it recovered in the bedroom?
I thought so.
Okay. Didn't read that it was recovered outside of the bedroom at the top of the stairs where the defendant was seen placing it down?
I did not.
Okay. I want to talk to you about the part of your report where you go into medical history and substance use.
Yes.
Okay. So you note in your report that she gave you a medical history including some hospitalizations, correct?
Yes.
And I think we've covered that those hospitalizations were not verified in any way by you.
Only by talking to her sisters who corroborated that happened.
Okay. And you note in your report that she does not have a diagnosis of ADHD, correct?
Correct.
But that she was taking Adderall.
Correct.
And then you note in your report, you make kind of go out of your way to note that Adderall is commonly abused. It's a drug that can be commonly abused, but in this case, there was no evidence of misuse by the defendant, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know why she was taking Adderall if she was not diagnosed ADHD?
So a lot of times people take Adderall even when they're not diagnosed with ADHD. They take it because they need to focus at work, or they take it, I mean, it's such a robust medication, it's such an effective medication that people will just take it when they need to concentrate extra.
And you would agree that drinking alcohol while taking Adderall can have very negative side effects, correct?
It's possible.
You would not advise one of your patients to drink multiple vodka drinks regularly while taking Adderall, correct?
That's correct.
And that's because Adderall can have dangerous side effects like intense emotional shifts, increased rage and aggression, and extreme irritability if you mix Adderall and alcohol, correct?
It's possible, yes.
What is Seroquel?
Seroquel is an antipsychotic medication that in lower doses is used to help a person sleep.
Did you confirm with her medical history that she was prescribed Seroquel for antipsychotic purposes or to help her sleep?
To help her sleep.
Where did you get that confirmation from?
Her sister had the medications from the drugstore.
So her sister just had the prescription?
Correct.
Did you get the medical records or notes explaining why she was prescribed that Seroquel?
It says it on the prescription. It says indicated for sleep.
And what about combining Seroquel, Adderall, and alcohol? Would you advise your patient against combining those three substances?
I would advise against that.
And is it because it can have similar side effects such as rage and aggression?
It's more, I don't think it would have side effects like rage and aggression. It would just make you like really sleepy.
Is your testimony that drinking alcohol while taking Adderall and Seroquel together could not possibly cause side effects or symptoms like emotional shifts, rage, aggression, or irritability?
It would cause rage and aggression. I have never seen that in 20 years of clinical practice. The combination of those three, never.
You have never seen someone describe drinking alcohol with Adderall causing anger or aggression?
You're asking with the combination of Seroquel too. Seroquel is so sedating. Alcohol is also so sedating that it more just makes you kind of loopy.
But Adderall is not sedating, correct?
Correct, but it wouldn't counteract. I mean, of those medications, Seroquel is the most powerful. So it would really be, someone like that would be like just kind of out of it and loopy.
How about on such a low dose of Seroquel?
Well, a low dose is, it seems like a low dose, but the low dose makes you sleepy. The higher the dose you go, that's if somebody's experiencing things like hallucinations, hearing voices.
Your testimony was that you would not advise someone taking all of those medications at the same time
Correct.
because it can cause significant negative side effects.
Correct.
Did she ever report to you why she flushed the shell casings or bullets down the toilet?
No.
Did you ask her?
Yeah, I mean, I take that back. I mean, she basically just said she panicked.
She panicked
Yes,
and decided to flush the bullets and the shell casings down the toilet.
that's correct.
Did she ever explain to you why she didn't attempt to provide first aid to Mr. Barron?
No, we didn't talk about that at all.
Did she ever mention to you the night prior to Mr. Barron's death, did she ever mention the defendant forcing her to perform oral sex on him?
No, the way that was told to me was the night of the offense.
Well, so I guess we kind of combine March 7th and March 8th together. So let's say the night of the offense, did she describe to you being forced to perform oral sex on Mr. Barron?
She did during our second meeting.
And did you not find that important to note in your report?
I did not.
You didn't think it would be important to note in your report that on the night where Mr. Barron was killed, he forcibly got the defendant's head and made her put her mouth on his penis?
The way that this was told to me, there were certain details that she was more consistent in. She mentioned that one time, so I kept in the things that I thought were most consistent.
So the reason you didn't mention it in your report that she said that was because you found it to be inconsistent with the other things she was saying?
It wasn't inconsistent, it just wasn't repeated.
Would it not be important to potentially note inconsistencies in your interview with the defendant?
Sure.
But you didn't note that in your report at all?
Well, it wasn't really inconsistent. It just wasn't a detail that she was saying over and over again in presenting her story.
But you're there to evaluate her for PTSD based off of trauma that she experienced by Mr. Barron, correct?
Correct.
And she disclosed to you that he forced her to commit aggravated sodomy on him, and you did not find that important enough to note in your report for this case.
I didn't put it in my report.
What about, did she disclose to you being forced to shave Mr. Barron's penis the night before she murdered him?
No.
She didn't mention that at all?
No.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Wanted to circle back about abusers in intimate partner violence relationships and ask you some questions about that, okay?
Sure.
Okay. Do abusers in intimate partner violence cases, do they do things like affect the person's dress or the food they might be eating?
Yes.
One of the questions, well, I don't want to forget to ask you this too. And I think this is in the report on page 5. If you have your report, it's not the last paragraph, but the second to last tall paragraph of page 5.
I'm ready.
Okay. Did you note something in her interview with Investigator Mefford at the Law Enforcement Center where she makes a statement about, I don't know if I should tell you everything?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember that statement being sandwiched between requests for his status and whether he was still alive?
That's correct.
What is the significance, from your standpoint, in a clinical sense and in a treatment sense, of asking if he's alive, then making the statement, I don't know if I should tell you everything, and then asking again if he's alive, and then not telling, basically, about this prior violence?
Well, the significance here is that Ms. Mericle asks repeatedly whether or not Mr. Barron is alive, and she's really never given that information. Even though it was known, it was known to investigator, it wasn't known to her. And so for all intents and purposes, she thinks that Mr. Barron is still alive. So long as she thinks that Mr. Barron is potentially alive, she remains in fear of him and isn't going to disclose.
Ms. Bennett asked you questions about the jail counseling that Ms. Mericle was provided.
Yes.
And you've stated that, she was told not to talk about the event with the counselor, but is it correct that she was reporting difficulty sleeping and hypervigilance?
That's correct.
Claustrophobia?
That's correct.
Did she report withdrawal and hopelessness?
Yes.
Was she presenting with a flat affect?
Yes.
And did the therapist note she was speaking in low tones with a monotone voice, making minimal eye contact?
That's correct.
Did she even make the statement to the therapist, I don't deserve anything better?
Yes.
Did she report recurrent nightmares?
Yes.
Intrusive thoughts?
Yes.
Did she talk about increased heart rate and sweating?
Yes.
Did she also describe feeling empty and numb?
Yes.
Was she observed with a slumped body posture by the therapist?
Yes.
Are these, did she appear with disheveled and fatigued?
Yes.
Did she have minimum eye contact and speak in soft, monotone, flat voice to the therapist?
Yes.
Is this consistent with a person suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and other stuff?
Yes, that's a great way to characterize it. So some of these symptoms overlap, but some do not. Nightmares, the heart racing, the intrusive memories or intrusive thoughts, those are very specific to PTSD.
Ms. Bennett asked you questions about I think the word we were using was index event.
That's correct.
Okay. And maybe everybody knows exactly what we're talking about when we say index event, but index event in this case is, correct me if I'm not stating it right, it's the event identified by the person that has the post-traumatic stress disorder as the cause of this, or as the primary cause of what you said, exposure to a life-threatening event.
Yes, the most distressing event.
And for PTSD, it has to be exposure to a life-threatening event.
That's correct.
Judge, can I have the ILMO, please? Is the exposure to the life-threatening event, the index event that she identified was the pistol to her lips, correct?
Correct.
What you saw on the body cameras that you watched, those 3 hours, is her behavior consistent or inconsistent with an acute trauma response to a life-threatening event?
Yes, it is consistent.
Last question. In your work with victims in intimate partner relationships, how does the abuser typically respond to information that the victim is moving on?
Angrily.
Is that something that the victim is going to respond to in any way other than with violence or anger, in your experience?
Could you repeat the question,
Yeah.
just so I understand?
When the victim is told and learns that there's a threat that when the abuser is told that the victim is now moving on in the intimate partner violence relationship,
Yes.
how is that abuser going to respond to this new information based on your experience?
So most often, the abuser will do something aggressive or violent to try and get the victim to stay in the relationship.
And is that consistent with the case file in this case, once Mr. Barron learned about Mr. English?
Correct.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. You may be excused.
Jim Persinger.